course. Good to be here.
Absolutely. So me and you go a ways back. For people that
We
don't
really do.
know, I used to manage a nightclub in Atlantic City for about like 10 years, and you were one of the residents. And this is beyond cool because like I feel as though, you're one of those people who take the job extremely seriously to the point where, when you come in, you're coming in there to DJ. You don't really come in there to bullshit. You're just pretty much there to do what's right for the party, execute,
Yeah, yeah.
and get going. So
Yeah,
I feel as though
definitely.
that's perfect, man. So first and foremost, how long have you been DJing?
Well, I got my first turntable and a mixer, only one turntable for my 16th birthday.
Hmm.
And then I was just, bedroom DJ, kind of messing around. I had bad equipment. And then when I went to college, I got a little bit more serious, started throwing house parties and started DJing at bars and things like that. And
Uh-huh.
then when I moved, that was in Rochester, New York, where I went to college. And then I moved to New York City and slowly started doing, the same thing, more bars and working my way up and got a couple of lucky breaks
Yeah.
that put me in some clubs, and put me in front of people who, gave me a lot of opportunities. So I just, it was just kind of a classic story, just grinding it out. It took a long time
Hmm.
to sort of
Yeah.
get to a point where I was working regularly,
Yeah. You're from Cincinnati,
originally from Cincinnati.
originally from Cincinnati. Now you had a big period of your life in Miami when Live First basically came online, correct?
Even before that, it was probably around 2000. I'm going to guess around 2005. Again, from sort of working my way up, I met a few people who in New York from Miami who wanted to give me a shot down there, and they gave me a great opportunity to DJ like a store opening, and I did the nightclub that night, which was at the time Privé and
Ah, okay.
Opium and Mansion, and it was all they kind of ran the beach at that time. And the owner really liked the set. He liked, I think, my vibe with the guys who brought me down, the promoters, and it just felt like a good fit. So he brought me down a couple more times and then made me an offer that was basically like, I want you to work 4 nights a week at my clubs,
Hmm.
but you got to move here. You can't live in New York anymore. And I mean, I loved being in New York. New York was home to me. So it was a tough decision, but it was a business decision for me, and it worked out. And I was still in New York all the time. And even when I was in Miami, I was in New York pretty much constantly. And then I ended up back up there um, a few years later. But I had a place in Miami, and I was there for a few years solid during really great years of Miami nightlife.
Damn. Oh man.
It was good. We started some really fun parties, and I DJ'd some really legendary clubs, and like Live did open during that period when I was down there.
Yeah.
But there were a ton of really amazing clubs and parties. But yeah, I was there for opening night of Live.
Now, for somebody that basically has accumulated as much music as you've had, and I can tell by like basically the shelf that you have in the back that that's only a portion of what you have as far as a collection is
Oh yeah,
concerned,
yeah.
as far as vinyl, as far as your hard drives, anything that you pull from a record pool or anything like that.
Hmm.
But the how far does the collection go? Like when you're like the intricacies of the music that you basically stored and made into libraries, and the fact is you're a collector, so
Yep.
it's like, is there anything out of the limits of what you're able to store in your collection, or are you just using anything?
No, no. I mean, when I first started DJing, I didn't have any. I didn't want to be a club DJ. I was really into. I was just a really big hip hop fan, and
Right.
then at some point, I heard someone in Cincinnati DJing like breaks, basically playing like original samples and doubling it up, and that really opened my eyes. And right away, it clicked. Like, okay, I want to get into this stuff. That sort of the samples and the breaks that hip hop came from. I really got into that, kind of tracking down all those original records. So it was a lot of funk and soul and jazz and just spending a lot of time in the record store. And then when I went to college, I worked at both the record stores in town, and I just spent, I mean, you get into nerd culture, like the ultimate is literally when you live in the record store and it's just all day,
Yeah.
pretty much all you care about. I was just working for trade credit. You know what I mean? You put in those hours and you basically are spending your whole income
I
on
was just about to
records.
ask you that. I was like, did you get paid actual money or did you get paid in records?
I think maybe one of the record stores paid me occasionally, but the whole reason I was there was just to get first dibs, and then to get paid in, I was so happy getting paid in credit. And at that time, I was living so cheap.
Mhm.
You in college, it was just like, five dudes in a beat up house. So
Mhm.
there was no expenses. So, any free time I had would go towards, finding records.
So as far as like taking all the vinyls, the 45s and everything like that, were you able to like accumulate samples and basically throw them on an MP and try the samples out yourself? Did you try your hand at producing, or were you just
Yeah, I mean, I've been producing more lately, but
really?
I always tracked down records to, um, with the intention of producing, and I did a lot of DJing for like b-boy battles and breakdance stuff. So I was looking for that kind of for up tempo drum breaks and stuff like that. And I always bought records if it had a good loop on it. I was never really focused enough to really dive into production in that way, and also it just felt like a whole different universe from what I was doing.
Uh-huh.
But recently I've been going back through my record collection. When I moved, I moved from New York to LA, and I did a big purge and got rid of like probably half my records. But I organized what I kept and really went through it and pulled a lot of samples, and I've been working with that stuff. So it's been really good.
Right.
It's a lot of good records. I mean, I my collection, in anything I collect, I try. My motto is, all killer, no filler.
Mhm.
I don't want to have like a lot of junk in there. I just kind of want to, get sort of the top tier of what I'm looking for.
Mhm.
With music, that doesn't necessarily mean the rarest or the most valuable records. That just means the things that I like the most, or the songs that mean the most to me. But try not to have a lot of just extra stuff laying around. That being said, there's probably, 7,000 records or something like that. So there's a lot of stuff laying around, but
Right. So you're
it's
not
been
as
worse.
so you're not
It'd
so
be
you're not a
worse.
hoarder. You're not a hoarder
I
whatsoever.
mean, yeah, that's always a conversation. Like, I'm not. I think everything that I collect has value.
Right.
It's not just like I'm not collecting scraps of paper. Well, I am collecting scraps of paper, but I'm not collecting just like trash. Like, like one of my collections that I had for many years was this Boombox collection.
I,
And
I was going to
over
get
the
to that.
years, well, we can get into it, but
Yeah.
people would say like, you're a hoarder. You're what are you doing? Like, what are you doing with all these radios? They're in storage. They take up so much space. And then fast forward 20 years, and they're in Sotheby's, and I'm selling it as a legitimate complete collection. And
Yeah.
so that's sort of the mentality that I enter collecting with. And I come from, my mom is a collector, my grandma, they're all from Minnesota,
Okay.
and their whole life is about antiques. Their free time, when it wasn't, being out in nature, it was going to antique fairs, antique stores, and buying like, antique pottery, and up there is fishing decoys and duck decoys and all kinds of stuff. So my grandma's house was like a museum of this stuff. My mom
Mm.
had an amazing collection. So it was just in my blood. And I kind of from an early age understood, I think, the mentality of collecting, but not just hoarding. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
collecting with a bit, kind of a purpose.
That's what's up, man. Now
Yeah, yeah.
that's tell me about the Wall of Boom. Like, how did that start? And what we're talking about is this collection of boom boxes that you basically constructed
Yep.
among your collection, built into a wall, and it was sold on auction at Sotheby's, like just
Yep.
recently, correct?
Yeah, ever since I was a kid, I always loved boom boxes. I was really just into hip hop,
Mm-hmm.
and being in Ohio, the access was really limited. So I always wanted these classic radios that I saw on album covers and videos on TV. But by that point, it was already kind of the early 90s. They were already hard to find regardless, the good
Right.
ones. And I didn't know where to find them in Cincinnati. I was always looking, and I could never find them. I'd always check the flea markets and all that. But the ones that I wanted, I couldn't find. So as time passed, eBay came around, the internet started, becoming a more of a thing for digging for stuff. I would just keep an eye out, and I started picking them up really early. And they weren't very expensive. And I bought one or two, and then you start learning about, what you don't have. And before I knew it, it was like 30 radios. And I didn't buy a radio for the last 10 years plus. This was an old collection that was a headache because it traveled with me. So I took it from, New York, Rochester to New York City, down to Miami, a bunch of it, and then brought
Right.
it back to New York City, and then brought it out here to LA. And in the last move, when I brought them all from LA, me and my wife, I mean, my wife thought the collection was really cool. So she was conflicted too. But I was like, I got to do something with these. Like,
Right.
it's too stressful moving them. It gives me anxiety. They're just going to go in storage. So
Uh-huh.
I came up with an idea to kind of show them at a gallery. And the gallery out here called Heavyweight. Shout out to Tyler, was really cool. And I built the big wall and kind of did a full layout and had them all playing through an FM transmitter.
Ah,
So all the radios are tuned to the same station, and then I was basically doing like a pirate radio station that we were playing the music through.
damn.
And then Sotheby's had this hip hop auction, sort of coincidentally, and
Right.
I knew the people involved in that, and they came and checked out the show, and a year later we got it back. I've shipped it back to New York, and then now it's gone. Now it's in London actually with the new
Wow.
owners.
Oh
But
man.
that was years of just like, what am I
That's what
going
I'm
to do with
saying.
this?
Yeah.
Like all my friends being like, what's wrong with you? Like, what are you doing with all these? They take up so much space. And
Uh-huh.
I just knew it was a pretty complete collection.
Hmm.
And over those years, those radios have gotten exponentially more valuable, as more people have learned about them, and kind of hip hop collecting has become a little bit more of a thing.
Man, that's an amazing story that you pretty
Yeah,
much
yeah.
have had that for that long. You finally get the opportunity to put it up and make it into a work of art, and then it pays out.
That's how it works, though. For me, I can never really force things, but when it feels right and when I can kind of envision it, doors tend to open and things kind of fall into place. It requires a lot of patience,
Hmm.
and you got to sort of be ready when the time comes and when the motivation hits. But that's kind of been my mentality on most things in my life. I get inspired, and then I can really see it all the way through, and it kind of happens. Whatever
Now,
that is, the secret or whatever.
that's crazy.
Yeah. But it
So
felt really good. I was ready to get rid of them, and it felt really good to let them go.
it was like an exhale. It was like
It's just nice, man. And with
no storage facilities no more.
no storage, with everything with COVID too, it's just been nice to kind of downsize. I had an
Yeah.
apartment in Miami I got rid of, and it just feels good to slim down a little bit,
Right.
right
Right.
now. And they went to a good home, and they're I think gonna be on display. So it's the best thing that could happen.
Hey man, at some point in time, you're going to be able to see it again.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm not worried.
Absolutely.
I'm not
So
worried.
so tell me that you did a mix. I'm going to say at the beginning of COVID. What is the fascination that you have with Brazilian music?
Oh, I mean, I started going to Brazil maybe around 2000,
Hmm.
and just kind of on a whim. I went for like 6 weeks one winter just to get out of New York.
Hmm.
Um, and I spent a lot of time there. And at the time, I was collecting more American funk and soul records. I didn't really know that much about Brazilian music, but I got really into digging in Brazil, and made some really good friends down there in kind of the record selling business, used record, vintage record business. And
Yeah.
I learned really fast, and the music is really amazing, and it's really rare, and it's really kind of special music, and it has a certain quality to it, especially when you're finding it in Brazil and
Right.
you're in that environment. And the place has a special place in my heart, and the music, I think, always reminds me of Brazil. And there's some amazing music that comes out of there. It's an amazing, like, kind of funky, funk and soul music, along with, the bossa nova and Brazilian jazz and stuff like that.
Yeah. It's all
But
chill music.
it's it's chill. I mean, it goes all directions. There's a big James Brown influence. The
Uh-huh.
guys who I dealt with a bunch of kind of older record heads, and they would throw parties down there, and that was a lot about bass music, and they liked a lot of American kind of R&B and Miami bass and freestyle and stuff like that. Um, so it was just really cool. And an appreciation. I didn't really speak the same language as these guys. My
Of
Portuguese
course.
is terrible, and they didn't speak any English, but we really were able to communicate just about, James Brown records and drum breaks and stuff like that. So my Brazilian collection is, like I said, it's not a ton of records,
Uh-huh.
but it's, all killer, no filler. It's a good collection where I can pull any record out, put it on, and be happy to hear it.
Yeah, to the point where you made an entire mix of strictly Brazilian records for, I think
Oh
you did
yeah.
it for like almost like an hour and a half.
Oh yeah, I got a lot of Brazilian records like that. But I mean, also I would go down, and what was great about it was this was, I mean, Brazilian records were rare, and you know there were a lot of Japanese collectors and English collectors who would go and buy them up.
Yeah.
The exchange rate was really good at the time for the dollar. I was broke at this time, so you know I would go down and you know I'd have a little bit of dough to spend on records, but not crazy. So the second trip I took, I brought a big crate of records with me, and of American records, funk and soul and stuff. And I just started trading. So I was trading with the dealers down there. So it it was just great, you know, and it was great to like leave these records from my collection there and to bring back, you know, the Brazilian stuff. Um, so it was really fun. I ended up going to Brazil. I've been there, you know, a handful of times, and it's a great, if you haven't gone, I mean, Rio is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. Sao Paulo is one of the best cities in the world, you
Uh-huh.
know, like a real booming metropolis with graffiti and all the great things that make a cultural city. So
Right.
um, recommend it.
So as far as like record collecting, because we've all known throughout hip hop history, we've all heard about basically DJs all basically garnering up themselves to go to the same exact spot to try to get the records first. You've heard those stories from Pete Rock to Dilla to Premier to
Mm-hmm.
Maceo from De La Soul. They basically they're just trying to find that record, you know,
Yeah.
and they'll sit
Yeah.
there for hours. Like,
Yeah. Go.
like
Yeah.
what about that whole routine amongst a bunch of DJs trying to find perfect music? Now, no, they're all producers,
Mm-hmm.
but as far as like just playing those records, because I remember when Premier and Pete Rock had their versus battles and everything like that, it was pretty much a sample battle. Like it was pretty much
Yeah.
music theory for that night. You would get the sample, and then you would get the pretty much the hit record that's attached to.
Yep.
So
I mean,
how does record collecting kind of like encompass what it means to be a DJ, like tasking in all those hours?
well, first of all, those guys are the ones who were kind of they kind of instructed record collectors like me who were
Hmm.
kids in the 90s. You know, I'd be reading, they did like record series called like Ultimate Breaks and Beats,
Yeah.
where they'd put all these records that got sampled, and I would just pick up those records and flip them over and write down every song on it. And that was my digging list,
Hmm.
you know? So Pete Rock, Primo, Q-Tip, Large Professor, these were all
Hmm.
people who you know informed kids like me. I wouldn't know about half the old music that I know about if it weren't for them introducing it to me. So when you talk about like sampling and you know the downside of sampling, or the original artists think it's stealing music or whatever, I just think I wouldn't even know about 85% of these artists if it weren't for
Right.
Q-Tip sampling them, especially the jazz musicians and things like that. Um, but to what you're saying, especially back then, before MP3s and Serato and all that, I mean, digging for records was a huge part of DJing. You know, now it's not. But you had to have the back then. You had to have the record if you wanted to play the song in the
Hmm.
club. So for me, I was trying to fill out all of my kind of current hip hop stuff and keeping up with what was new, and then going back and trying to fill in the gaps of everything I'd missed because I was too young in the '80s, you know, and you
Right.
know, just trying to go backwards and fill in even hip hop stuff that had come out 2 years before was impossible to find, you know,
True.
in the '90s because hip hop, you know, it's just gone, you know,
Yeah, it's like it all got
it
bought up.
it did back then, and it was rare. So you know, 12 inches could be 25, $30 for, you know, good 12s and stuff like that. So
Right.
you were just out digging, trying to find stuff for cheap, trying to fill out your collection. And then also just learning and um, paying attention to liner notes and the sleeves, and learning about all the different players on all the groups, and then looking for those players albums, you know. So you look for a Grover Washington record, something
Yeah.
easy that you might find, or Bob James, and then you look at the back and it would tell you who's playing drums, percussion, keys, whatever, you know. So then you go through and all those names become your new list. And now
Right.
you keep an eye out for that, and you start learning about labels, and over time you just start to, you know, get all this knowledge. and then you can find a community of other people who are kind of like you, who also share that knowledge. And then for me, this was in Ohio and Rochester, which are the stores that like Pete Rock talks about going to. When you hear these stories of like Pete Rock going and like buying out an entire record shop worth of shit, that was like the stores I was working at. So then you get to New York City and the stores are so it's like the cream of the crop. Like the shop owners, rather than a store in Ohio where like they're just taking what comes in off the street and sometimes good stuff comes in, you get to those New York City more specialized shops and they're the ones who are going and finding the best stuff, and then they're reselling it. And so those stores become like an amazing educational tool, because I would go to the shops like Sound Library and A1 and just look at the wall, and it was all records, I'd never seen before. And then I'd go back to Rochester or Cincinnati, and I had those on my mind at that point.
Word. And see, places like that, I mean, I think are like gems as far as their community is concerned. Because before, you could take those records, they'd have a record player for you to actually like play. You could put on the headphones and try to find exactly what you need. That doesn't happen anymore. You know what I'm saying?
Only at the old school style record stores, that are kind of a dying breed now. So now you don't really have to have a shop. You can kind of sell everything online. You don't have to deal with customers. You don't have to deal with people touching the records and all that stuff. So unfortunately, a lot of record stores, records are really popular right now, but it's tough to have a record store and pay rent when you don't necessarily have to.
True. It's true, man.
So, but I have a bunch of, the record store was home base for a lot of years. And anybody who thought DJing was cool, or like, now you see like these EDM guys, or you see the big DJs and they're kind of celebrities. Back then, being a DJ just meant you were a dork, you were a nerd. You lived in these record stores, and it's like comic books or anything else. You're just soaking it in and just being a nerd, learning this shit and collecting and bragging to your friends about stuff that girls don't care about. You know what I mean? Like, none of that stuff was impressing a girl. Girls weren't, it wasn't like you were cool or anything. You're
like, when you actually bought a record and you actually pretty much went line for line the producer's credits of every single song, and you'd sit there for hours like trying to like figure it out. Oh, Beat Miners did this one. And like, oh, Evil D did this one, or like something like that. And that's the type of thing that would like figure out. And you would have these like arguments with kids on the bus and everything like that. We're like, no, arguments about producers, not even the artists.
Favorite producers for sure.
Straight, and they were all DJs
for sure. Most of a lot of really good producers are DJs. I think it goes hand in hand, for sure.
Yep. So let's flash back 4 years ago, 2016. So I remember being in the office where I worked over at Borgata, and I remember Tara letting us know, but like, hey, Ross wants to do his book release party here in Atlantic City. And I was like, he got what's the book about? And he was like, it's about vintage rap tees. And I was like, what? I remember like going to my computer and going to look this up and like trying to like figure out exactly like what was about to like happen when we did it. And I remember running back to Tara, who we both know, and I was like, fuck yeah, let's do this. And so we threw a party. You were DJing that night, and we ended up having copies of this book, rap tees, on every single table in the club.
That was amazing. That was so cool.
Yeah. So
you guys were, just to sidestep a little bit, I say it all the time, that club and the team that worked at Murmur, I'll always say, people ask me what are my favorite clubs to play in the world, and that club always comes up as one of the top, because first of all, the room was just perfect. It was a perfect size club. Meaning it didn't have to be packed for it to be great. It also weirdly had like a local clientele that's just so rare in a club like that. And then you guys, the staff, just that alone, like you guys were like, yeah, we'll throw your book party here. And we had Ghostface. It was crazy. It was just nuts. You guys, it was just it was a ultimate hospitality service for the patrons and for the DJs. And it was just a great room, a great club. You guys were the best. So
it's crazy.
I'll give you guys another shout out.
Thank you, man. I totally forgot that Ghostface performed that night.
Ghostface was there. I was just looking at a book there and he signed it. And I was like, oh my God, I forgot.
Yo.
Yeah.
So this project,
Yep.
would you say that it was as long as in accumulation as it was to the Boombox collection, or is this something that goes far beyond that?
Way beyond that. Yeah.
Okay.
Because the boombox is like, it was 30 or 35 radios, and I had a pretty good, I had pretty much my whole hit list covered. With
Right.
the t-shirts, it's a little bit more endless of you learn about new t-shirts all the time.
Yeah.
And also they were just as tough to find, a lot of the ones that I was really after. And it started around the same time, just being a real fanatic, a hip hop fanatic, and wanting to be a fan, wanting to wear a t-shirt for my favorite group, and
Yeah.
not having the access, and then kind of that planting the seed to where I was just always looking for them, just like if I was at the record store, I was always asking, you ever get any t-shirts? If I was talking to anybody who did promo, you got any extra t-shirts, whatever. And that collection was the same sort of thing though, where when the internet came around, it was able to grow a lot faster just for access.
Yeah.
And also at the time they were so cheap and people didn't know what they were. They were, it wasn't like people thought they had any value. So it wasn't a big commitment to pick up tees at that time. And it's another collection that just grew and snowballed. And then next thing I know, I'm like, geez, I got a lot of these things. What am I going to do?
Right.
And the idea came around to do a book. And it was like, well, yeah, if I'm going to end up selling them or whatever, might as well showcase all of them first, put them all together as a cohesive collection. And that was how Rap Tees started.
Man. So aside from this, inside of this book are not only your collection, but I believe there's a few other people's collections in here as well, right?
Oh yeah. Well, when I started shooting my tees, I realized that there was a lot of gaps, and I started reaching out to friends and other collectors from New York. Some vintage dealers like Procell and Kirk for All to Envy out here in LA, and then a lot of Japanese collectors. I kind of put out the call in Japan and just said, like, I was over there DJing, and I just said, anybody with t-shirt collections, like, come to the studio on this night. It's going to be set up. Bring your tees. Let's shoot them. And 15 guys came, someone with garbage bags full of vintage hip hop tees. And it was really cool. So it's a ton of collectors, probably, about half the book is mine, more or less. And the collection's grown since then. So
I'm sure
I'm slowly starting on a volume 2. It's just a work in progress. Those books are a passion project. It's not nobody's buying houses selling books on books about t-shirts, but it's fun and it's fulfilling.
But it's fascinating because the thing is, that's a cultural item, So like the fact that we had the ability to wear our favorite artists on our backs or on our chests in order to establish ourselves as fly when we were in the streets just meant something. You've had the opportunity to put a lot of these inside this book, and in the meantime, you've had photographers like Joe Conzo, who was like godfather of hip hop photography. in essence of it all, it's beyond dope, and you've turned this into a brand to the point where it's now overseas. Like I've seen that you put it over. It's in Japan now.
Yeah, it's a full brand in Japan. So it exists as a brand only right now in Japan. And it's a full line. They've released seasons and do tons of. We've done collabs with Joe Conzo and Ricky Powell, and we've done Beastie Boys tees and Big L tees and all kinds of stuff. In Japan, and it's exclusive to Japan right now, so it's kind of a special limited thing. But yeah, Joe is the man, and Joe is. I hope he gets more recognition for how important he is as a documentarian of that era, because he is underappreciated outside of the hip hop community who knows about him. As well as there's a lot. Chimo Do is in the book also. A lot of great photographers contributed work. Jeanette Beckman, Ricky Powell, Glenn Friedman. So I was really proud to have their photos in there, and appreciative.
Right, and that's just somebody else that's basically taking upon himself to be like, okay, I'm just hanging with my boys and I got my camera. and he's
I
just
mean,
he's documenting everything that's happening, and it turns out that this is landmark beginning of hip hop.
the birth, yep.
Yeah,
And really no one else is doing it. He's
yeah,
I mean, there's a few photos, you know, here and there of Cold Crush and of that era, but nothing like his. I mean, he's in the high school. He's basically a student, you know,
yeah,
taking the photos and going to high school with these guys. So
right. Yeah, he's not a
he's
professional
a legend.
photographer at that time.
He's
He's
a
like,
legend, and yeah, he just sold a bunch of prints. He did like a limited run of prints, but you know, hit him up and you know, follow so you can buy a print, because I think he's one of those guys who there's no question his photos are only going to become more and more important historically, you know, as time goes on. So shout out to Joe. He's the man.
absolutely,
And the
absolutely.
nicest guy ever, you know what I mean? Like one of those dudes who, you know, doesn't have to be as nice as he is.
Hmm.
So, you know, I always appreciate it.
That's true. That's true. Now, fast forward to right now. Of course, we're in the
Mhm.
middle of a pandemic and everything like that, and it seems like just like DJing has its like evolutions. I remember when, of course, vinyl went to CDJs. I remember when crates went to Serato. You know what I'm saying? Now, like we're starting to it's a weird time because there's a lot of live stream DJs. I know D does it a lot and he's very successful at it right now. And it
Yeah.
seems it's
You could
almost
say
like,
that.
yeah, man,
Crushing it.
D is beyond crushing it.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it seems like there has to be something like a middle ground where DJs are going to have to find some type of footing where it's easy to fit, because DJs are not going to go anywhere. It's just more so what's going to
Yeah.
take place.
We're in a weird time, you know. I mean, the guys who enjoy live streaming, who get something out of it, it's great for them. You
Hmm.
know, I don't get much out of live streaming,
Right.
other than interacting with my friends. And, you know, my wife and I live streamed for a while. We do a party called Home Friends, which
Yeah.
I had a lot of fun doing that party because we were just playing music we love. And the good thing about it is you're not, you know, you can play pretty much whatever you want when you live stream and people can choose to tune in or tune out. But I definitely, you know, for me, DJing has so much to do with responding and reacting to
Yeah.
the room and trying to and DJing for dancing people, you know, and trying to, you know, have a flow. So that's really tough when you're streaming, and I don't get the same enjoyment out of it. I enjoy playing a lot of the music that I don't get to play in the
Hmm.
clubs, but you know, it's different. And when DJing comes back, which I think it will, you know, it might be another year, you know,
Yeah.
until the clubs really come back, but it's going to be different for sure. And I think the DJ rates are going to be pretty decimated. I think we lost a lot of clubs, so there's going to be a rebirth, and it's going to be interesting to see what comes out of that, because before COVID, there was a decline happening
Right.
in the clubs, you know, and we were seeing less less residencies, less DJs having nights. You
Hmm.
know, it was more like kind of a rotating cast of DJs in the clubs,
Right.
which is a little tough because you know, I always think in clubs, people who go to clubs really want to kind of know what they're going to get. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? They like a little consistency to know that, like, I'm going to go, I'm going to hear this style of music. It's going to be played somewhat, you know, this way, and I'm going to have a
Right.
good time. Um, and it was good for DJs too, because that's kind of how you could differentiate yourself. You know, like you could find your lane. You know, like our party on Mondays at Murmur had a distinct feel to it and a
Yeah.
distinct, you know, vibe. And some people could crush that room, and other people struggled. You know, and I think you guys did a good job of kind of whittling that down to like your core
Yeah.
of people, so that the crowd knew what to expect.
Well, our biggest thing was that we felt like parties didn't need to be forced. They had to be organic.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
If you tried to force a party, it was going to look lame.
Hmm.
There's a such thing as doing too much. You know what I'm saying?
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
so so we always felt like, okay, the DJs basically their position within the party is to pretty much read the room, elevate the entire the whatever the vibrations are within the room,
Hmm.
they act on that,
Yep.
and then they bring it to the surface, and then everybody is just gelling, having a good time,
Yep.
whether they are dancing, whether they're drinking, whether they're conversating. It's all going
Mhm.
to happen organically because it's a vibe. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? So,
Yep. Yep.
and that's the thing that people are going to miss, and they know who to go to get that back.
I think so. We're going to see. It's going to be an interesting year. I mean, that's all I can.
Yeah.
I don't know what to expect. I think a lot of DJs are going to be looking for a new job. You know what I mean? I
Hmm.
think all of us are exploring our options. Like
Yeah.
we're all expanding our horizons, which is probably a good thing. But we'll see what the club landscape looks like after this.
It's true.
It's going to be a whole new. It's going to be a whole new world, and we've seen with streaming, there's been a real consolidation also, like, about a couple DJs now, you know what I mean? Like,
Exactly.
and we'll just see how that translates when, hopefully, knock on wood, if when clubs reopen here, hopefully not too long from now.
It's true.
Um,
But it also proves that you guys aren't one dimensional. There's a lot of people that maybe seem that way and just like kind of like went under the
mhm.
rug. But then there's a lot of you guys. We come to find out, so much about you in the meantime. We would when seeing basically you had your wall of boom and soapies, we would have never thought that if we hadn't known you. You know what I'm saying? So
Right,
it was
right.
like, and then like to see other people like evolve throughout the game, like basically like when we're talking about like with D, even though he's live streaming and everything like that, like he's almost turned into like this brand. It's like
I
this,
mean, he's a celebrity.
like
Yeah,
it
he's a
like
full
like
celebrity.
like it is
Yeah.
straight up interviews and everything. Like not only was he a hip hop legend before that, and all that shaking hands and kissing babies has turned him into a brand, which has been which has been cool. And the thing is, a lot of DJs have taken the opportunity. Like I was already like this. I didn't have to like
Yep.
be behind the decks in order to showcase who I was.
Hmm.
Outside of here, I'm a totally different person. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. The hustle is the same, for guys like D, I mean, it's been the same grind, the same hustle. So it makes sense, like he had just hit his stride basically.
Yeah.
And it was in the stars for that to
Mhm.
happen. So, um, and you hope it happens to like cool, humble people, that's
Right.
that's the main thing, you just want it to be people who put in the work. And so I think everybody's happy for D, and it's been really fun watching like Clark Kent. I mean, I've been able to see sets from a lot of my favorite DJs who I never got to see sets from. So, you
Yeah.
know, it's been cool. Stretch is on a lot, and
Yeah.
caught a few sets.
Now, does that like because you've toured like traveled so much and everything like that, does that like cause like invisibility to like see a lot of good music that are out there or see DJs within their craft doing so?
You mean because I've been traveling,
Yeah,
or
because you've been traveling, like have you
yeah, yeah. I
you're
mean,
like,
you're
man,
just caught.
I would love to see that person, but I can't because I'm all over the place and everything. So the fact that you've gotten a chance to sit still, you've
Mhm.
gotten to like basically like see everybody's skill set.
And you see them playing stuff they want to play.
Yeah.
They're not doing an event or working a club where they might not be able to play the stuff they like. I mean, when you're in the grind and you're traveling like that, you're just exhausted. And I do a really bad job of going out. You know what I mean? Like on
Hmm.
nights off, like
Yeah.
that's part of the job that I'm not necessarily great at. Like being out and just socializing every night and hearing and drinking and whatever.
Right.
So it is an easier way to do that. And the exhaustion. I mean, I definitely feel that travel schedule it kills you. It really beats up your body. And
Mm.
so the beginning part of quarantine, I was like, man, I feel like like a new person. I'm going to bed at a regular hour. I'm not waking up at 4 for a flight,
Uh-huh.
or um, it was great. And now I'm like, all right, let's get back to work. But
Right.
for a minute there, the travel, yeah, the travel is one of those things that you want it before you become successful. It's all you want is to be a traveling DJ. And then when you're in it, you're like, you would just give anything to just be able to stay
Uh-huh.
home for 2 weeks. But
Sit my ass
no,
down.
no complaining about that. Knock on wood, we get back to that level because I think we'll all have a new appreciation
Word.
for
Now,
it.
How's those yearly fishing trips in Montana, man?
I mean, I went this year. I barely went, but fishing is I just get real into. I tie my own flies, and it's fly fishing, and I got out for about 5 days this year, which was much needed.
Uh-huh.
I was trying to go with my father-in-law and my wife usually go, but with COVID, it just got too intense. So
Sure.
I just skipped town on my own for a few days, and yeah, went to Montana. That was cool. I wish I could have got out more. My plan when I came to California was like, oh, I'm going to be so much closer to rivers and nature.
Mm-hmm.
So, but then this hit and it just didn't. This year is a wash.
Yeah, man.
Birthdays, celebrations, holidays is a wash. Just scrap it. 2021 is a brand new year, brand new president, brand new everything. Let's focus on the future.
Yeah, thank God. And I know. I mean, we've had our talks about what happens in the world politically, and
Yeah,
I'm in a better state of mind now.
I mean, just waking up. I mean, he still terrorizes us every single day. Finds a way to terrorize us. But there's definitely a sigh of relief that maybe we can have a little bit of normalcy. Just not wake up in a panic about what today. Would be nice.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that.
It's like a provocateur, man. He tries to start your day off with some bullshit.
He's a nightmare. He's a nightmare of a human being, and thank God that he's on his way out. Hopefully, if we can pull him out of there.
Yeah, man.
Anyways, we won't get into politics on this chat.
No, that's only a smidgen. Well, hey, Ross, man, look, I appreciate you doing this with me.
I appreciate you, man. You're one of the realest in this business since day one. So anything you need.
Look, man, I felt like when I started this that I needed to talk to people that I connected with, and throughout just life and everything. And I always see you basically persevering and doing things out of the ordinary to just push the envelope. And that's just always been cool with me. And I felt like I needed to reach out to you and ask you, we were like, bro, can I just talk to you for about an hour? Because I feel like,
man.
You know what I'm saying? You're interesting and I want to hear it.
This is the time. If you have hobbies, if you have interests, just dive in. You know what I mean? And really get into it. That's what I've been doing, getting into everything, gardening, whatever it is, just dive in and doors are going to open if you're passionate about it and you're really into it. Like you know what I mean? Like I tune into your thing. I never know what you're talking about when I tune in, it's all fantasy comic.
Yeah.
But no matter what, it gives me a good feeling to see you talking about something that's important to you with people who are like-minded.
Yeah.
And I feel like you just keep doing it. And, just like this, doors open, things happen.
True.
You find your community, and next thing you know, there's opportunities and a more fulfilled life. So yeah, it's been fun to watch too, to see it. I like tuning in and I'm just like, I'm always lost, but I like, I like hearing about it anyway.
Okay.
I like hearing experts talk about the things that they're passionate about. That's always
that's what's up, man. Thank you.
That's a good feeling.
Hey, man. Well, hey, it was good. It was good to see you. I appreciate
you too.
I'm gonna reach out. Hopefully, what I'm saying, as much as I do now, and see exactly what you're doing. I hope this bullshit ends because I do definitely want to see you behind the deck, just tearing it up.
You and me both.
But other than that,
make a little dough. Start paying some of these bills.
Exactly. You know what I'm saying? We can't sit on our thumbs for this long.
I mean, the hobbies. I mean, it was nice to see that Boombox, collection kind of pay off. I always anticipated that when that happened, it was going to be like some side cash that I could then invest in another collection.
I could tuck this.
I didn't think it was going to have to be like mortgage money, but that's 2020 for you. So we keep it moving.
Oh, man.
We adapt. That's what it is.
Yeah. Hey, glad it happened when it did. That's all I can say.
Very glad.
Absolutely. Glad. Hey, man. Well, it was good to see you.
You too.
Right. And I really, really appreciate the talk, man. This has been cool as hell, man. Thank you.
Anytime.
All right, man.
I'll see you online.
Facts Project. We out.